The small town of Ravenswood lay under a thick blanket of mist, its cobbled streets deserted as the heavy rain drummed against the rooftops. Shadows stretched unnaturally long under the dim glow of flickering streetlights. A lightning bolt illuminated the ominous silhouette of Blackwood Manor, a towering relic of the past, perched like a silent guardian atop the highest hill. The mansion had been abandoned for decades, yet recent occurrences had sent the town into a spiral of fear. Ghostly apparitions, blood-curdling screams in the dead of night, and mysterious flickering lights had turned Blackwood Manor into the town's greatest nightmare. In his office, Mayor Kensington paced anxiously, his hands clasped behind his back. His usually composed face was taut with worry, his gaze fixed on the rain-lashed windows. The town's businesses were suffering, and tourists were fleeing. If the hauntings continued, Ravenswood would soon be little more than an empty husk. With a heavy sigh, he reached for his phone, hesitating only a moment before dialing a number he never thought he would need. He spoke nervously into the receiver. "We need your help. Blackwood Manor is haunted. The town is in danger. Please come quickly." Hours later, the hum of an engine echoed through the deserted streets as the mystery machine rolled into Ravenswood, its bright colors an almost surreal contrast to the dreary town. The van came to a stop, its headlights casting long beams across the rain-soaked pavement. One by one, the gang stepped out, their expressions a mix of curiosity and determination as they took in their surroundings. The mayor stood waiting, his eyes wide with urgency. Fred exuded confidence as he extended a firm handshake. "Don't worry, sir. We'll get to the bottom of this." Velma adjusted her glasses, glancing around with keen scrutiny. A classic case of localized hysteria, perhaps. People see what they expect to see. Daphne crossed her arms, taking in the mayor's nervous stance. Or a clever scheme designed to scare people away. Either way, we're on it. Shaggy chuckled nervously, pulling his jacket closer around him. "Can't we, solve a mystery that doesn't involve ghosts?" Scooby-doo whimpered beside him, his ears flattening. "Right, no ghosts." The mayor led them through the rain toward the iron gates of the manor, which groaned in protest as they pushed them open. The towering structure loomed ahead, its windows dark and unwelcoming. The moment they stepped inside, the temperature seemed to drop. A damp, musty scent filled the air, and dust swirled in the dim glow of the gang's flashlights. The echoes of their footsteps seemed unnaturally loud against the ancient wooden floorboards. A sudden wailing sound pierced the silence, reverberating through the vast halls. The candlelight flickered violently, and for a brief moment, a spectral figure appeared on the grand staircase, its tattered robes swaying as though caught in an unseen wind. A voice, hollow and haunting, echoed through the manor. "Leave this place, or suffer the consequences." Shaggy and Scooby screamed in unison, clinging to each other as their knees buckled beneath them. Fred instinctively raised his flashlight, sweeping the beam toward the staircase. Daphne took a step forward, squinting into the darkness. Velma knelt beside an old carpet, running her fingers over the dust-covered floorboards. She murmured to herself, "These footprints, they're fresh." A gust of wind slammed one of the heavy doors shut behind them, making the entire group jump. The eerie silence that followed was thick with tension. Whatever was haunting this place, it wanted them gone. Fred straightened, his voice firm with determination. "We need to split up and investigate. Something tells me this isn't a real ghost." Shaggy's eyes widened in horror as he backed away. "Or, hear me out, we don't split up, and we leave the ghosts alone." Scooby nodded rapidly. "Yeah, good idea." Daphne placed a reassuring hand on Shaggy's shoulder. "Come on, guys. We've been through worse. Besides, if there's a mystery here, we're going to solve it." The gang exchanged uncertain glances, the tension thick between them. With fear creeping in and danger lurking around every corner, one thing was certain: this mystery had only just begun. The heavy wooden doors of Blackwood Manor groaned as they swung shut behind them, sealing the gang inside. A cold draft whispered through the halls, carrying the scent of damp wood and old fabric. Their footsteps echoed unnaturally, making it feel as if unseen figures were walking just behind them. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the grand staircase for a brief second. The flickering candlelight cast long, dancing shadows along the cracked wallpaper and dusty portraits that lined the walls. A gust of wind rattled the windows, making the entire house feel like it was alive. Fred adjusted his flashlight, scanning the area with a determined expression. All right, gang. If we're going to solve this mystery, we need to split up and look for clues. Shaggy let out a nervous chuckle as he clung to Scooby-Doo. Or we could, stick together and not get haunted? Scooby nodded quickly, his tail tucked between his legs. Right. Velma, already examining a set of peculiar footprints in the dust, shook her head. If this is anything like our past cases, this ghost is probably someone with a motive. We just need to figure out what it is. Daphne pulled an old candelabra from a nearby table, dusting it off as she glanced around. Let's be careful. This place is falling apart. The gang hesitated but ultimately followed Fred's plan. Fred and Velma headed toward the east wing, while Daphne took Shaggy and Scooby toward the kitchen. As Shaggy tiptoed down a narrow corridor, a sudden crash echoed from the darkness ahead. He jumped, gripping Scooby in fear. Tell me that was the wind. Scooby gulped and shook his head. Nope. Daphne stepped forward cautiously, holding up her candelabra to illuminate the source of the noise. At the far end of the corridor, a large mirror lay shattered on the floor, its shards reflecting the candlelight like eerie stars. Above it, a painting of an old man with piercing eyes stared down at them. A whisper filled the air, carrying the same chilling words they had heard earlier. Leave this place. Shaggy and Scooby bolted in the opposite direction, only to be stopped by a set of double doors swinging open on their own. The darkness beyond felt vast and endless. The flickering candles revealed a vast dining hall, its long table covered in dust, as if frozen in time. Daphne frowned. It's like someone left in a hurry, but who? Meanwhile, in the east wing, Fred and Velma examined a series of old newspaper clippings pinned to the wall. They were yellowed with age, but the headlines were clear. Heir to Blackwood Manor vanishes without a trace. Cursed estate claims another owner. Ghostly apparitions continue to haunt Ravenswood. Fred furrowed his brow. Looks like this place has a long history of disappearances. Velma adjusted her glasses. But disappearances aren't ghosts. There's something we're missing. Before she could finish her thought, a sudden thump sounded from behind a nearby bookshelf. They turned, exchanging a glance, before cautiously approaching. Fred reached out and pushed the bookshelf aside. A hidden doorway stood before them, the darkness within beckoning ominously. Velma took a deep breath. Looks like we just found our first real clue. The house groaned as another bolt of lightning split the sky outside, the mystery deepening with every passing second. The air grew heavier as Fred and Velma stepped through the hidden doorway, their flashlights illuminating a narrow stone passageway that extended into the darkness. The damp walls were covered in cobwebs, and the faint scent of mildew filled the air. Footsteps echoed faintly in the distance, making them both pause. Fred turned to Velma, his voice hushed. This passage isn't on the manor's blueprints. Someone has been using it. Velma knelt, running her fingers along the ground. There are fresh footprints leading further inside. If I had to guess, someone's been moving through here recently. Lightning flashed outside, momentarily lighting up the hidden corridor through small cracks in the stone. The flickering glow revealed an old, rusted lantern resting against the wall, as if someone had abandoned it in haste. Velma picked it up, examining the half-burnt wick. Fred pressed forward, cautiously stepping deeper into the passage. The tunnel eventually led to a circular chamber, where an old wooden desk sat covered in dust and scattered papers. A single candle flickered on the desk's edge, as if someone had been there not long ago. Fred shifted through the papers, his eyes narrowing. These look like old deeds and letters, all signed by someone named Edgar Blackwood. Velma picked up a torn newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Missing heir to Blackwood fortune still unfound." Before they could investigate further, a loud crash echoed from above. They exchanged a worried glance before turning back toward the passage's entrance. Meanwhile, in the manor's dining hall, Daphne, Shaggy, and Scooby stood frozen as the sound of a falling chandelier sent a cloud of dust billowing into the air. Shaggy clutched Scooby, his voice trembling. That just fell on its own, right? Scooby gulped. Right? Daphne stepped forward, brushing dust from her jacket. I don't think it fell on its own. Something or someone made that happen. She shone her flashlight upward, revealing a tattered rope dangling where the chandelier had been. Someone had cut it deliberately. Her expression hardened. We're definitely not alone in here. The room's atmosphere grew even colder as the wind howled through the broken windows. Shaggy grabbed Scooby's paw. Maybe we should, head back to the van? Before Daphne could respond, a shadow moved at the far end of the dining hall. A tall, cloaked figure darted toward an open doorway, disappearing into the darkness beyond. Daphne's eyes narrowed. Come on, we have to follow them. Shaggy groaned, reluctantly following as Scooby whimpered at his side. They raced down the hallway, past old suits of armor and faded tapestries, until they reached a library filled with towering bookshelves. The figure had vanished, but something else caught Daphne's attention. A single book lay open on a table in the center of the room. She stepped closer, reading the title aloud. The Secrets of Blackwood Manor. Shaggy wiped sweat from his forehead. I don't like where this is going. Scooby nodded, his tail trembling. Me neither. Daphne flipped through the pages, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. Guys, this book talks about hidden rooms beneath the manor. Shaggy blinked. Hidden rooms? Before she could answer, a loud creaking noise filled the air. One of the bookshelves slowly began to slide open, revealing a dark stairwell leading downward. Daphne took a deep breath. Looks like we just found another piece of the puzzle. Shaggy groaned. I was really hoping you wouldn't say that. The mystery deepened as the gang prepared to descend into the unknown. The narrow stairwell gaped before them, a dark passage plunging into the unknown. Daphne held her flashlight steady, its beam barely reaching the bottom. A damp, musty scent wafted up from below, carrying the weight of centuries past. Shaggy shivered, clutching Scooby tightly. Are we sure we need to go down there? He whispered, glancing at Daphne with pleading eyes. Scooby nodded rapidly. Right, no need to go down. Daphne took a determined step forward. We came this far. Whatever secret Blackwood Manor is hiding, it's down there. Velma and Fred arrived, just as she placed a foot on the first step. Seeing the hidden passage, Velma adjusted her glasses. So this is what the book mentioned. A hidden network of rooms beneath the manor. Fred scanned the stairwell with his flashlight. This could be where our ghost has been hiding. Daphne nodded. And the only way to find out is to keep going. With a deep breath, the gang descended one by one. The wooden steps groaned under their weight, the air growing colder the further they went. Shaggy stuck close to Scooby, their eyes darting in every direction. The passage eventually led to a massive underground chamber, the walls lined with dusty shelves stacked with books and artifacts. At the far end, a heavy iron door stood partially open, revealing yet another passageway. Velma moved toward the bookshelves, brushing a layer of dust from the spines. These are records, documents about the Blackwood family. Some of these date back over 100 years. Fred examined the iron door. This wasn't built as part of the original manor. Someone added it later. A sudden noise echoed through the chamber, making everyone freeze. A metallic clang followed by a low, dragging sound came from the passage beyond the iron door. Shaggy gulped. Sounds like a really bad idea to go in there. Daphne tightened her grip on the flashlight. Sounds like exactly where we need to go. As they stepped closer, a gust of wind howled through the chamber, extinguishing their flashlight beams for a brief second. The room was plunged into near darkness. When the lights flickered back on, Scooby let out a terrified yelp, pointing at the doorway. A tall shadow moved just beyond the threshold. Velma gasped. Someone's in there. Fred didn't hesitate. He pushed the iron door open fully, revealing another passageway, its walls lined with ancient torches that cast flickering shadows. The gang exchanged nervous glances before stepping inside. The passage led to an even larger underground hall. An old wooden table sat in the center, covered with scattered papers, an oil lamp burning low beside them. The walls were adorned with faded portraits of the Blackwood ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow the intruders. Velma picked up one of the papers, scanning the text. These are letters written by Edgar Blackwood. Fred leaned in. The missing heir? Daphne ran her fingers over a deep groove in the table. Something happened here. Before anyone could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps filled the chamber. Slow, deliberate, and getting closer. Shaggy and Scooby backed up against the wall. Maybe it's time to run? A shadow stretched along the floor as something or someone entered the hall. The gang held their breath. The footsteps grew louder, each deliberate step echoing against the stone walls. The gang stood frozen, their eyes locked on the arched doorway as a tall figure emerged from the shadows. Cloaked in a long, tattered coat, the silhouette appeared spectral, its presence amplified by the flickering torchlight. A sudden gust of wind sent the torches sputtering, momentarily throwing the underground chamber into deeper darkness before the flames regained their strength. Shaggy clung to Scooby, his voice barely above a whisper. Like, now's a good time to panic. Scooby's tail tucked between his legs. Right! Panic time! Fred stepped forward, keeping his flashlight steady. Who's there? The figure halted, standing just within the light's reach. A gloved hand reached up, pulling back the hood to reveal a gaunt, pale face. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and filled with something that wasn't quite malice but certainly wasn't kindness either. His features were sharp, his expression cold, and the dim lighting only made him seem more ghostly. Daphne narrowed her eyes. You're Edgar Blackwood, aren't you? A slow, deliberate nod. I am. His voice was deep, edged with an eerie calmness. And you have no business here. Velma adjusted her glasses, stepping forward. You disappeared years ago. The town thought you were dead. Edgar's lips curled into a faint smirk. That was the idea. Fred's grip tightened on his flashlight. So, the hauntings? It was all you? Edgar crossed his arms, his dark coat billowing slightly, as another gust of wind swept through the underground passage. Let me ask you something. Do you believe in ghosts? Shaggy gulped. We try not to. Edgar exhaled sharply, almost amused. Good, because what you've seen isn't a ghost. It's a warning. Daphne glanced around at the dimly lit hall, the letters scattered across the table. A warning for what? Edgar hesitated before answering. The manor has secrets that were meant to stay buried. My family, me ancestors, did terrible things to keep their fortune. If you dig too deep, you'll find more than you're prepared for. Velma picked up one of the letters. The ink had faded, but the words were still legible. She read aloud, The Blackwood fortune must be protected at all costs. No one must uncover the truth. Fred took a step closer. What truth? Before Edgar could respond, a loud crash erupted from the tunnel behind them. The sound of stone grinding against stone sent dust swirling into the air. The walls trembled slightly as a gust of wind howled through the underground chamber. Shadows danced erratically across the walls, and the torches flickered dangerously low. Shaggy yelped. Was that part of the warning? Edgar's expression darkened. It's too late. They know you're here. Daphne frowned. Who? A sudden, eerie whisper filled the chamber. It was disembodied, cold, almost mechanical, as if the walls themselves were speaking. The gang turned, and their eyes widened as the torches flickered wildly, revealing movement in the darkness beyond the chamber entrance. Figures, shrouded in long cloaks, stepped forward. Their faces were hidden beneath deep hoods, their forms barely distinguishable from the shadows themselves. The air grew thick with tension as they silently encircled the group, their presence overwhelming and unnatural. Fred clenched his fists. Looks like we're not alone. Velma's voice was hushed, calculating. I think we've stumbled onto something bigger than just a family secret. One of the cloaked figures took a step closer, lifting a gloved hand. The torches sputtered violently, plunging the room into momentary darkness. When the flame steadied, Edgar had moved back against the wall, his usual stoic expression giving way to unease. A deep, resonant voice emerged from one of the hooded figures. You should not have come here. Scooby whimpered, pressing himself against Shaggy, who was trembling uncontrollably. We're super sorry. The figure ignored him, shifting its focus to Edgar. You know the rules. Edgar set his jaw. Things have changed. A second figure spoke, their voice lighter, but just as firm. The Blackwood fortune was never meant to be uncovered. Daphne took a step forward. If this is about protecting money, then someone's been trying to scare the town into staying away from this place. The first figure tilted its head. You think this is about money? A sudden gust of wind howled through the chamber once more, and the torches dimmed again. A low, guttural sound reverberated from somewhere deep within the tunnels beyond the figures. Whatever it wasn't human. Shaggy groaned. Like, I don't think I want to know what that is. Scooby nodded furiously. Right. Edgar turned to Fred. You wanted the truth? His eyes flickered toward the tunnel. It's coming. The final revelation, a deep, guttural sound, reverberated through the underground chamber, sending a shiver through the gang. The hooded figures remained motionless, their presence looming as the wind howled through the passageways, extinguishing the torches one by one. Shaggy's teeth chattered as he clung to Scooby. Like, this is officially the worst night ever. Scooby let out a nervous whimper. Right. Fred squared his shoulders, his flashlight flickering as he aimed it toward the shadows. If you have something to hide, we're going to find out what it is. One of the cloaked figures stepped forward, their voice calm yet commanding. You should not have come here. Velma adjusted her glasses, her keen eyes studying the figure's movements. This isn't just about the Blackwood fortune, is it? A heavy silence followed. Then, the deep voice from before answered, Number, this is about something much older. Daphne's brow furrowed. Older? The figures exchanged glances before the lead figure raised a hand, motioning to the chamber walls. As if in response, hidden mechanisms clicked, and the stone walls groaned as they slid apart. Behind them lay an ancient vault, its entrance marked with symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. The air was thick with dust, but the space beyond held something breathtaking, a grand chamber, lined with bookshelves, ancient relics, and a towering pedestal at its center. Resting atop it was a small locked chest covered in ornate carvings. Edgar Blackwood exhaled slowly. You weren't supposed to find this. Fred turned to him. What is it? Edgar's gaze lingered on the chest. The true Blackwood legacy. My ancestors weren't just wealthy. They were keepers of something powerful. Velma approached cautiously. Something supernatural? Edgar hesitated before nodding. Something dangerous. Daphne brushed her fingers across the carvings on the chest. And someone has been trying to keep it hidden. One of the cloaked figures stepped forward. It was never meant to be opened. A sudden, low rumble shook the chamber. Dust cascaded from the ceiling as the torches reignited on their own, casting eerie shadows across the stone walls. Shaggy yelped. Like, I think the house just disagreed with you. Scooby clutched his tail. Run? Before anyone could react, the ground trembled beneath them. The chest rattled atop the pedestal, the air around it shifting as an unseen force pulsed outward. Edgar took a step back, his voice sharp. It's waking up. Fred turned to the hooded figures. If you wanted to keep this hidden, then why lure people here? The lead figure's voice was grim. We didn't. Someone else did. Velma's eyes widened. The hauntings, they weren't to scare people away. They were warnings. Edgar clenched his jaw. And now, we're out of time. A loud crack split the air as the chest burst open, releasing a blinding golden light that flooded the chamber. Shadows twisted unnaturally, and an unearthly whisper filled the space, ancient and unintelligible. Shaggy and Scooby dove behind Fred, trembling. This is why we don't do ghost mysteries. Fred shielded his eyes. What is that? Edgar shouted over the growing noise. A force that was never meant to be unleashed. The hooded figures moved quickly, chanting in low, rhythmic voices. The symbols on the walls pulsed in response, their light forming intricate patterns as the ground began to settle. The chest's glow dimmed, its lid slamming shut as if sealed by an invisible hand. Silence followed. The chamber, once alive with movement, now stood still. Edgar released a heavy breath. It's contained. For now. Fred stepped forward. So the hauntings, the rumors, they were all to keep people away from this. Velma crossed her arms. And someone's been trying to break in. Daphne looked at Edgar. Which means this isn't over. Edgar nodded. Not even close. The hooded figures turned away, retreating into the shadows. One of them lingered briefly before speaking in a hushed tone. Leave this place and tell no one what you saw. Fred exchanged glances with the gang before turning back to the figure. We don't keep secrets. If someone is trying to release whatever's in that chest, we need to stop them. Shaggy groaned. Of course we do. Scooby sighed. Right. Velma adjusted her glasses. Then I guess we have a new mystery on our hands. With one last look at the ancient vault, the gang turned and made their way back through the passage. The manor stood silent above them, as if holding its breath, waiting. The Mystery Inc. team had solved many cases before, but something told them this was only the beginning of a much larger adventure.